My stepmom spread peanut butter between her. Then the dog did this. The moment I stepped into the living room, my heart skipped a beat as I caught sight of my stepmom. She playfully wrestled with our dog, and our dog was licking my stepmom like I never expected. Just as our eyes met, a spark ignited, a connection that went beyond the boundaries of family. It was a quiet afternoon when I walked into the backyard. The sun was shining gently, casting a warm glow over the entire space. I had just returned from a long day seeking some peace and quiet, but as I rounded the corner of the house, I was greeted by an unexpected sight. There she was, my stepmom, sitting on the grass playing with our family dog. I stopped dead in my tracks, feeling my breath catch in my throat. She looked different today, radiant in a way that I had never noticed before. Her laughter was soft like a melody that drifted through the air, and her carefree demeanor as through a ball for the dog felt strangely intimate. I stood there for a moment watching her, the way her hair cascaded down her shoulders, the way her lips curved into a smile. Every time the dog brought back the ball, it was captivating. I had never thought of her in this way before, but something about this moment stirred a feeling inside of me that I couldn't quite explain. There was a gentleness, a softness in her that I had never noticed before. As the dog ran towards her, she fell back on the grass, laughing uncontrollably, her body completely relaxed. Without thinking, I found myself walking towards her, drawn to the playful energy she exuded. She looked up and saw me approaching, her smile widening. "Hey there," she said softly, her voice carrying a sweet warmth. "Come, join us." I hesitated for a moment, my mind racing. There was something about the way she looked at me, something different, something that made my heart beat a little faster, but I pushed the thought away and slowly knelt down beside her. The dog barked excitedly, running circles around us, but my attention was focused entirely on her. Her hand brushed against mine as she reached for the ball, and I felt a surge of electricity race through me. We continued playing with the dog for what felt like hours, but time seemed to stand still. Every now and then our hands would touch, our eyes would meet, and there would be a lingering moment where neither of us spoke. It was as though we were both caught in this unspoken tension, something simmering beneath the surface that neither of us dared to acknowledge. Her laughter, her smile, it was all drawing me and making it harder to focus on anything else. The way she looked at me was different now, softer, more inviting, and I couldn't help but wonder if she was feeling the same strange pull that I was. Eventually the dog tired out, collapsing in a heap of fur beside us, panting heavily. She leaned back on her hands, stretching out her legs, and I did the same, sitting close beside her. There was a comfortable silence between us, broken only by the occasional bark from the dog. I glanced over at her, and my breath caught again. The way the sunlight hit her face, casting a golden hue over her features, made her look almost ethereal. She turned to me, her eyes locking with mine, and for a moment everything else faded away. The world seemed to shrink until it was just the two of us sitting there in the grass, the tension between us growing thicker with each passing second. "So," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper, "what's been on your mind lately?" Her question was innocent enough, but the way she asked it, the way her eyes lingered on mine, made it feel like she was asking something much deeper. I wanted to say something, to tell her what I was feeling, but the words were stuck in my throat. Instead, I shrugged, trying to play it off. "Not much," I replied, though my voice sounded strained even to me. She smiled. "You seem different today," she said, tilting her head slightly as she looked at me. I can't quite put my finger on it. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. There was a teasing glint in her eyes, as though she knew exactly what she was doing, exactly what I was feeling. I shifted uncomfortably, unsure of how to respond. My mind was racing, my thoughts a jumble of confusion and desire. Before I could say anything, she leaned closer, her face inches from mine. My heart skipped a beat as I felt the warmth of her breath against my skin. "Are you sure there's nothing on your mind?" she asked, her voice low and intimate. I could feel the tension between us growing, the air thick with anticipation. Every instinct in my body was screaming at me to pull away, to break the moment before it went too far, but I couldn't move. I was frozen, caught in her gaze, unable to look away. And then, just as quickly as the moment had started, she pulled back, laughing softly as though nothing had happened. "You're so tense," she teased, nudging me playfully with her shoulder. "Relax a little." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding, trying to calm the frantic beating of my heart, but the way she was looking at me now. The playful spark in her eyes only made it harder to keep my emotions in check. We sat there in silence for a while longer, the tension between us lingering in the air. Every time her hand brushed against mine, every time our eyes met, I felt that same electric pull, that same undeniable connection. It was as though something was shifting between us, something unspoken but incredibly powerful. I didn't know what it meant or where it would lead, but I couldn't deny the way she made me feel. There was a part of me that wanted to push it all away, to pretend that this was nothing more than a fleeting moment, but another part of me, a stronger part, wanted to give in to the pull, to see where it would take us. The sun was starting to set, casting long shadows across the yard, but neither of us made a move to leave. The dog had long since fallen asleep, curled up at our feet, but we stayed there side by side, lost in the quiet intimacy of the moment. Every so often she would glance over at me, her eyes lingering on mine just a little too long, her lips curving into a soft, secretive smile. It was maddening, this dance we were doing, this slow build of tension that neither of us was willing to break. Finally, as the last rays of sunlight disappeared behind the trees, she stood up, brushing the grass off her clothes. Well, she said, her voice light and casual, I suppose we should head inside. But the way she looked at me as she said it, the way her eyes lingered on mine, told me that this was far from over. There was a promise in her gaze, an unspoken invitation that made my heart race all over again. I stood up slowly, my mind racing with thoughts of what might happen next, of where this strange, unexpected connection might lead. As we walked back towards the house, the distance between us felt charged, every step bringing us closer to something we both knew was inevitable. And though I didn't know what the future held, I knew one thing for certain: this was just the beginning. As we stepped inside the house, the air felt heavier, filled with unspoken words and simmering tension. The door clicked shut behind us, and the soft evening light filtered in through the curtains, casting a warm glow over the room. She turned to face me, her eyes locking with mine, and for a brief moment neither of us moved. There was something in her gaze now that was unmistakable: desire, curiosity, something raw and electric. She took a step closer, her breath shallow, her lips slightly parted. I could feel the heat radiating from her body, and it took everything in me not to reach out and close the distance between us. Then, without warning, she did it. She reached up, her fingers lightly brushing against my cheek. As she leaned in, the world seemed to slow down as her lips met mine, soft, warm, and impossibly gentle. It was as if everything I had been feeling, everything we had been holding back, was suddenly unleashed in that one kiss. Her hand slid around to the back of my neck, pulling me closer, and I could feel the heat of her body pressing against mine. My hands instinctively found her waist, gripping her tighter as the kiss deepened, our breaths becoming more frantic, more needy. Time ceased to exist as we got lost in the moment, in the feel of each other's touch. Her fingers tangled in my hair as she pulled me closer, her lips hungry against mine. The soft sounds of our kisses filled the room, each one more passionate than the last. I could feel the urgency building between us, the way her body responded to every touch, every kiss, driving me wild. My hands roamed down her back, exploring the curve of her hips as she pressed herself even closer, her breath hitching in her throat. There was no going back now. Whatever boundaries we had before had been completely shattered, and the only thing that mattered was this moment, this connection, this undeniable desire that consumed us both. She pulled back slightly as we caught our breath, our hearts racing in sync. Her eyes were dark with desire, her lips swollen from our kisses, and I could see the same intensity reflected in her gaze. I've wanted this, she whispered, her voice barely audible for so long. The confession sent a shock wave through me, igniting a fire I couldn't control. Without hesitation, I pulled her back into me, capturing her lips once more as our bodies moved together, perfectly in tune. Every kiss, every touch felt like a promise of more, of everything. There was no longer any hesitation, no holding back. It was just us, lost in the intensity of the moment, completely consumed by each other.